It's recording. Hello, Rosa. How are you?
How are you?
We're recording now.
Okay. So how are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. And how are you there in the UK?
Just plodding on from day to day and waiting to see what's going to happen next.
Right. We gotta talk about emotional upheaval, and maybe it's timely because of what's going on with the C word nowadays. Everybody's having that kind of upheaval, which obviously not only emotional, physical, financial, what have you, which stops them from having that elation, that have that ascended mind consciousness, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it taught a lot of people a lot of things. So being indoors in close proximity to the people you live with, I think had a way of illuminating all the issues that are usually swept under the carpet.
Yeah.
I think it may have fixed some things, but I certainly think it made people reevaluate. But for those who are in toxic or abusive situations, then it's a nightmare.
Why do you say that?
Because if you are a victim of domestic abuse, for example, there is no escape. There was no escape during lockdown. Okay. I think many people cope in that situation because they have an escape route. They have school or they have work, or they can go and visit friends. But stuck indoors, if there's something like that wrong, you can't get away from it, can you?
That's true. And I wonder, well, it looks like there is an increase of, unfortunately, suicides. That's what they're saying in the statistics, sadly, especially in the UK.
Yes, it's tragic. It's also interesting because I've had parents bring teenagers to me for healing.
Oh, wow.
And for readings because they're lost. And sometimes it's more difficult to coming at it from a completely different viewpoint. 16 to 21-year-olds aren't always ready to be academically brilliant. You know, school is a very tough place. If you can survive school and you can survive your family, you're doing well.
I'm sorry, you froze and I cannot hear you. I'm not sure if it's my signal, so I'm losing your.
Didn't really want to go back.
I'm sorry, Rosa, you froze for a little bit and then I did not hear you what you were saying, but you started with saying that parents are taking teenagers with you for a reading or what have you, and then
or a healing session.
Yeah, that's
because they're struggling with school,
right?
Or they don't want to go back.
Yeah,
and the parents are assuming that there's something wrong with them. You know, they need to get focused. They need to study. They need to get through their exams.
Yeah,
and I think many of them are simply not. They're not committed to going the same way that their parents did. So you end up with stressed teenagers and scared parents who don't know what's to become of them.
oh, that's not good. And
but it shocks me that the first question they ask is, what do you want to do? You know, you need to study so that you can get qualifications, so you get a higher paid job. The question, what would make you happy, seems to be last on the list.
Wow, that sounds so tragic.
Yes. But it's this thing that everybody's conditioned with about achievement.
Yeah.
You need to achieve this in order to get that. They may not want to buy a house. They may not be worried about what their earnings will be 20 years in the future.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I think they're entitled to be like that at that age. You know, you know that thing, I mean, I often say the law of attraction. How many people do you know who say, all I want to do in life is be happy? And then they'll go out doing something they hate 5 days a week for the sake of paying the bills. It's not a vibrational match.
I can definitely say that, you know, frequencies of our existence has changed so much, and vibrations are changed as well, because sadly I myself has been in that kind of mindset.
Yeah.
Or not myself, but I mean my mom was on that kind of mindset when, you know, I was growing up, thinking that, you know, you should be like this, you should be like that. And I mean, initially when I graduated nursing, I wasn't very happy. I wasn't a happy person because I felt like it wasn't my first choice.
Yeah.
But eventually I've learned that obviously I've become, you know, I eventually loved it because of, I suppose, the journey I had in my life wherein I was able to travel the world practically because
Yeah.
of my job. But the initial impact of it to me was, it wasn't my first love, which somehow still affects me now, because I would have been have the feel I should have been have the feeling of, you know, that saying that, you know, not working a day in your life because you know, you love your job so much that you don't feel like you're working at all.
Yeah.
So that has been the kind of society collective thinking that my mom has to go through as well, for her
Yeah.
to push us, her kids, to have, you know, to achieve this and that, you know. I mean, bless her, you know, she done really well for us all, for me and for my brothers and sisters, and we were able to have that comfort in life at least. But you know,
Yeah.
I would have thought the world would have been a
We
different
have all been
place.
so brainwashed,
Yeah.
one
I would-
generation after another.
yeah.
We call ADHD attention dialed into higher dimensions.
A what? Sorry.
Attention dialed into higher dimensions.
Yeah. I've not heard
People are
about it
being
though.
diagnosed with all kinds of mental health issues.
Yeah.
And my bet is that with most of them, there's nothing wrong with them.
Exactly.
But Doreen Virtue, who created most of the angel cards, she was also a family therapist. And she traveled the world talking to families of children with ADHD and on the autistic spectrum.
Yes.
And what she discovered was, she said, children with ADHDs, there's nothing wrong with these kids. They're just hardwired differently. They arrive at different, you know, they're different when they get here. And they can already see the futility of a political education system. So they refuse to participate. And when they become disruptive in the classroom, society's answer is to dumb them down with medication and segregate them, because they don't want people who think outside the box. Nobody is bothering to nurture those wonderful. A friend of mine had a boy who was autistic, and when he was 12, excuse me, he could speak 3 different languages already.
Wow.
And he was teaching himself Hebrew. And an amazing aptitude for figures. And they're very often, their artistic talent is fantastic. So they're just different. There's nothing wrong with them.
And then they get indoctrinated and they grow up to be a different person than they were.
That's right. That's right. It saddens me. I meet so many teenagers and they've just left school, and I say, so what's next for you? I want to go to uni. Well, what do you want to study? Business and marketing. What happened to art and philosophy and that kind of thing. So we're not encouraged to do anything creative. You know, as they say, they want us clever enough to run the machines, but not bright enough to think for ourselves.
Yeah, we are talking about emotional upheaval
Well,
on different levels, uh, and the current situation where we are in now in September, towards the end of September 2021. Uh, what sort of emotional upheaval do you think or do you see thus on a level of a person going through a lot of this, lockdown and quarantines, on a level of man or wife husband relationship, on a level of family, and then on a level of community, society, and of course the whole nation? I know that's a lot, but with your readings, are you able to sort of come across those kind of questions?
yes, I get them a lot. And there's a lot of unpicking to be done. So because we've all been so indoctrinated, we've been so taught to live in fear. And some people are so, do you ever think about how many direct debits people pay out every month? We pay in case there's a fire, in case you have an accident, in case you become ill, in case you die, in case you're burgled, in case, you know, and that does something to your brain. So I
I'm
think
waiting.
fear is the biggest one, because people have been, it doesn't matter which way you did things and whether you were prepared to abide by the rules or not.
Yeah.
It was still fear propaganda 24/7. Every time you access the internet or turn a TV on.
Yeah.
But then I think people carry a lot of emotional baggage around, way back to their earliest years. And they've got these unresolved issues. And if you don't resolve them, if you leave them buried, then sooner or later they're going to manifest physically. So I think on a mental and emotional level, people are traumatized by the situation of the last 18 months, on top of all that stuff they already had going on.
Yeah.
So we've really been put through the ringer.
Yeah. And the sad part about it is people does things out of fear, which are irrational. They can make you hate your neighbors because they not taking, for example, the you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then they can hate you or shame you in public because you're not wearing this.
Well, it's the age-old strategy of divide and conquer. Keep people fight amongst themselves, and you're not looking too closely at what they're doing, and you're much easier to control.
That is sad, and that's our reality. And unfortunately, I'm just thinking right now, something just comes up in my head about, I don't know if people would, I mean, people like you and I and those who are researching would agree that all of this, I mean, there's a saying that the bigger the lie is, the more people believed it.
Yeah.
And it becomes their reality. And in my head and in my research and in the many people I've listened to as well who does research, and there's a lot of them, both experts and not so experts, but passionate about researching and discovering the truth. I come to a conclusion that whatever is happening right now, this C thing is actually non-existent. And as a nurse myself, I don't see any more flu patients. They're all gone.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how, what I'm trying to get at is amazing how the power of make believe can make people create reality. And we, because of some people who has control of giving us all this information on the mainstream media, we collectively, especially when I say we, we as a collectively, but not necessarily you and I who's researching stuff, but they have collectively created the world we live in now. And
Sorry, you froze for a minute.
Oh yeah. All right. So what I was saying, that because of they have the control of the mainstream media, they made people believe that it's actually real.
Yeah.
And it is so real in their heads that they're scared to go out and mingle, or even see their family. And some even goes to the extreme of those funny pictures that you see on on memes about the whole guy wearing plastic all over his body,
Yeah.
because they believe it's real. And
it's interesting, Francis, because sorry I interrupted you, but
no, go for it.
there are memes floating around Facebook in which they're describing the humanity being gaslit.
Yes.
The process is identical to a narcissist preying on their victim.
Yes.
Making them believe that they're worthless.
Exactly what's happening.
And that, yeah. And they're doing it worldwide.
Yes.
And when I'm counseling a survivor of domestic abuse, you have to make them understand where the pain first started and how it's led them into one toxic cycle after another. And then you have to start to unpick the damage that's been done, because they're all about people pleasing, because they have a very low opinion of themselves, because they'll automatically take the blame for things they haven't done. They will assume it must be their fault. That's what happens, and it always has its roots in childhood.
Now, I just realized that this might be an interesting question, at least in my head. I think it is. Because you've been, having to have clients and seeing people for all sorts of problems pre this, you know what I mean? And now that this is happening, this pandemic thing, has there been a change in the people you see from before and after, in terms of the kind of emotional upheaval they're having?
Not that I can really pinpoint. I think that there were a set of problems relating to the human condition.
Right.
And this last 18 months may have, like I said, caused people to reevaluate. And it may have had a big impact on their lives. If, for example, they've lost a business, or they've had to change their business, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's the same. And you traveling, I'm sure you'll know, you can, across cultures and nationalities and all kinds of groups, the problems remain the same. In terms of, there will be problems when people are power hungry,
right,
or they are bullies, or they've been traumatized by some kind of childhood abuse. Those things really don't change.
But has it more been, perhaps maybe my question probably should be, has it been more pronounced pre and post, or what, or it's about the same as well?
I think in some cases, I have clients who they lasted 2 weeks into lockdown and then the relationship broke up. And it's interesting to say to them, but can you see that those problems were always there?
Right.
It was just when you were stuck between four walls 24/7, you found you really couldn't cope with it any longer. So it's in some cases, it's been kind of a progression. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, it did, of course. I'm just thinking, I mean, you know, on a good, is there a good side to what happened?
Yes, for those who chose to make use of it in that way. You know, people invested in their homes and their families. It's causing, I heard of one group of parents who, 5 sets of parents got together and employed a teacher between them to homeschool.
Right, so, okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm trying to think what else has been. I think a lot of people have woken up. A lot more people are aware than there were before.
I think the good thing that happened out of this is actually a worldwide awakening.
Yes.
I have groups on Facebook that you're probably familiar with, you know, the political side of it, the spiritual side of it as well, and you know, so the health side as well from my career. And I think if I'm processing in my head the kind of posts and things that I'm seeing before and after, and now that's, you know, people are more awake. I am surprised actually that a lot of people are talking openly about used to be what we call conspiracy theory or taboo topics, and
Yeah.
these are in, you know, in being shared in groups, and more groups are coming up as well to, you know, to discuss all these things, to expose this and that, and you know, this great awakening. Do you see that as well as the case?
Yes, I noticed a change. So at the beginning of lockdown, if you dared to post anything controversial, criticize the mask or any treatment that was out there, there would be an argument straight away. You know, people would start to attack you.
Yes.
And you could see arguments like this all over social media. And then you watch the pendulum swing, and more people started to criticize because more and more people were seeing that the things they were doing just weren't logical.
True.
You know, the excuse me, the restrictions be set.
You froze. You hang on a minute. You froze for a little bit. I don't know. It's my signal, maybe. Yeah. I don't know if you can hear me, but
shadow banning is quite a clever idea, actually.
Sorry, Rosa. You froze again, but you're back now. I don't know if you can hear me. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I can hear you. I thought you frozen.
Probably my signal here, but we froze on the so when you were just starting to, you know, to talk.
Okay, so we were saying that initially, when the first lockdown started, if you dared to question,
yes,
the efficacy narrative, if you said anything about masks not being the right thing to do in lockdown, then you were immediately attacked. And you could see all these arguments going on all over social media. And then we reached a point, I think it was maybe the end of the first lockdown or when we were going into the second. And people were starting to question, because the restrictions being imposed just didn't make any sense. They weren't logical. The government's own figures didn't add up.
Right.
And although some people were still falling for it, many people were starting to question it that hadn't before. And then you saw censorship creep in. They were quite happy when we were all at each other's throats, when we were all fighting with each other.
Yes.
But once we started to disagree with them, that's when, I mean, people have been losing their YouTube channels and all kinds of things for a very long time now, last couple of years at least. I think they deleted 40,000 YouTube channels in about a 3 months period.
Well,
but in terms of emotional upheaval, I think I was saying at the beginning, you know, there are, so I think that this generation of teenagers aren't necessarily going to accept that is the way forward. You know, what we've always been brainwashed with, you must grow up, you must get good results in your exams, you must study so that you can get a good job, so that you can have a decent income and you can afford to buy a house and have a family.
Yes.
I don't, it's almost as though, or it feels to me like they have a bit of an attitude, well, you've locked me in for the last 18 months, so now I'm going to take my time and I'm going to do it my way. And I think that terrifies parents because they don't know what to do with them. I used to have simple rules when my kids were young. It's like, if you have grown-up habits like drinking and smoking and you want to go out and buy clothes, then get yourself a part-time job and earn some pocket money. I'm not a never-ending, but you know, I'll keep the roof over your head and I'll feed you if you want to study. But if you have the kind of pastimes that cost money, well, you need to go out and earn some.
Right.
It's usually the quickest way. But I don't think everyone is ready to be academically brilliant when they're in their teens. I think their mind is on other things. But we try and shape them, don't we? This is how it's done. And they're starting school and nursery earlier and earlier and leaving later and later because it's more opportunity to brainwash them.
I have a friend who's a mom who lives here in Nevada, and she's saying that more and more, you know, moms like her have embraced homeschooling.
Yes.
And that they don't trust, you know, schools anymore to teach their kids. Do you see that as well as the way forward for schooling?
I think a lot of people, excuse me, are now saying that they won't allow their children to have that treatment. Someone very close to me said to me a couple of weeks back that they'd had to, they did a drive-in test, like a PCR test.
Yes.
And this 5-year-old threw a tantrum. You know, they'd already had one and they hated it. And this person said, I am not going to pin my 5-year-old son down and stick that thing up his nose ever again. I'm not doing it. So I think parents are starting to question, and many parents are already adamant that they aren't going to allow their children to have these things. So there won't be any other way forward. Maybe some of them are, but maybe what they're not realizing is by taking them out of the political education system, they're stopping that brainwashing. They're going to be taught what's valuable for them, you know, valuable tools to get through life with.
Yeah, it
rather
should be
than what the school, because I mean, we're hearing horrendous stories about trans people going into schools wearing outrageous costumes and giving lectures to children. And there's one guy talks about the books that are in the public library, you know, and parents have no idea that many of them that this is going on.
Yeah, like sexually explicit books that little kids can have access to.
Yes, why are they sexualizing children?
And not only that, they're giving or taking away the parental authority of most parents so that kids doesn't need to ask their parents when they want them to get the in school.
So you can't have sex or get married or drink or any of those things until you're over 16. But between 12 and 16, you are apparently qualified to make a decision.
It's so
what they're saying is the state owns your children. You don't. That's outrageous.
That's not only what they're saying, that's actually what they're acting. Anyway, we have already been to 30 minutes on this conversation. I probably have the few last questions about the what, who, how, and why. So if we were a book and people are reading us in a book and we are talking about emotional upheaval, in our current times where we live in now in 2021, what do you think, or how do you define emotional upheaval?
I
Is it
think
is it
all of the
defined
same
as,
emotional problems are still there, but on top of that, you've got the current situation.
would you say that that would include fighting for freedom in its general sense?
Yes.
Because
Yeah, for
that's what it
some,
is.
for many,
That's
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 what it's about.
yeah, that's exactly what's happening to us now.
Yeah, so it is a mass awakening. That would never have happened, and it also, you know, in lockdown, you were no longer so worried about your appearance. People probably overate, and many of them rebuilt their houses from the inside and ordered lots of stuff on Amazon, but you still, it made people come to terms with themselves more.
Right.
And excuse me, the other thing I was going to say is, sorry, many people who start the awakening process, or they suddenly get involved, they want to explore spirituality, mediumship, all that kind of thing. It happens. So sorry, Francis. It happens because they've had some emotional trauma. They've gone through the breakup of a relationship. Have you noticed how people do that at funerals? They come home from funerals and they suddenly start thinking about where their life's going. They start contemplating their own mortality. Because somebody's died. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, it often takes a major trauma for people to start to wake up and start looking at life differently. And I think collectively this has been the same. It's caused people to reevaluate and look at their lives.
You made me wonder whether the bad guys are actually the good guys who's trying to do this, putting it as to us collectively, so that, you know, we will have this kind of awakening. I don't.
Well, I
mean, that's a bad thoughts I have, you know, about even considering that the bad guys are actually the good guys. My God.
No, but I can see your point, and I did hear a medium, and she was saying that yes, we would lose many people, but actually this was due to happen over a 25-year period. Anyway, the population was going to be reduced by however many percent. That would have happened over 25 years, because as people are awake and aware, women would want their freedom and they wouldn't want to have children. She said what this process has done is speeded that up, so now it'll be achieved within 10 years. So that's an interesting theory. For me, I've seen myself for a number of years now as a bridge builder, a door holder. I think we don't keep stalling because things aren't. I think we keep stalling because we're going to take as many people with us as possible.
Right. I wonder whether that thought of me, that I don't accept 100% about, you know, the bad guys being the good guy, is part of the emotional upheaval that I'm going through personally.
Could be, but I don't think you're wrong. But it's like it's kind of cause and effect. Every cloud has a silver lining. So I suppose they thought they were clever by locking everybody down. You know, I often think they must be sitting there laughing.
You got it. I think you put it perfectly into words, that they think they were clever.
Yeah, but it's kind of backfired on them, because it's woken more people up than ever before.
Yeah.
So I mean, hasn't this been said about the internet? It was created for nefarious purposes.
Yes.
But nobody could have predicted how it. I mean, I joined a group of. It was started by Sean Jason in Canada in 2009, called Light Workers of the World.
Yes.
And within 1 month, he had 5,000 members in 17 different countries. And my friends list within 6 months, went from 250 to 5,000. Energy workers from across the globe were connected.
Yes, true. They're connecting. And not only that, you'll be amazed when you watch somebody and then you suddenly felt like, I have a connection to this person. Why don't I add this guy? So when you go to his or her profile and then you would add him, and then only to see that, what? I have 10, 15, 35 common friends with this person.
Yeah.
You've noticed that? Like,
Yeah.
we are connecting as a soul group, and it's crazy. I just want to mention, because you talk about earlier about, you know, the population getting reduced or something like that. Because when I had some kind of awakening back in before 2012, I felt like I have accessed the Akashic record. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know as of 2011, I know it was before 2012. And I know at that time that the world population is around at least, you know, between 6 to 7.5 billion.
Mm-hmm.
However, actually, the Akashic record was saying that the world population at that time is actually just a little about half of that, maybe around 4 billion.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be at all surprised. I often have this discussion about there are people who actually think the depopulation agenda makes sense because there aren't enough resources to go around if we keep consuming at the rate we are.
I don't agree with that.
That's rubbish. There are plenty of resources to go around. It's just they're being controlled by a few psychopaths.
Yeah.
And years ago, I worked with, I looked after his wife, the guy who he had been the world's leading geologist.
Right.
And he went somewhere and predicted that a volcano that had been dead for years was going to erupt.
Right.
And they thought he was stupid. And it did erupt, and it took a whole village with it. But he was the guy that helped them find all the iron ore deposits in the Lake District in the UK during the war for munitions. Right. So, you know, he had a biography that read like it was like a Yellow Pages. It was like a telephone directory. And I once asked him about the hole in the ozone layer. And he said, Rosa, there's always been a hole in the ozone layer. The difference now is they have the technology to detect it. He said, mankind does not have the ability to damage the earth. Mankind might blow himself out of existence, but the earth will always find a way to rebalance.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. These people are so arrogant and their egos are so big. You know, what right do they have to try and alter time, for heaven's sake?
Exactly.
And draw political boundaries and tell you where in the world you can go. They're crazy, and we've all fallen for it.
Right. So perhaps we should end this soon because we passed the 30 minutes, but we can, I mean, it's getting more interesting as we pass the, I wonder whether, I don't know, I mean, in the energy that you feel, you know, the kind of reading that uploads or downloads to you from the ether, whether you agree with that the population as I have seen it at that time is not actually, you know, what they're telling us in, you know, this big institution like the United Nations and all. Because although it's still, I mean, the population is not really the number that they're telling us, like it's 7 billion or what have you, because although it might feel very populated and, you know, crowded in big cities, but then again, I live in Arizona out of nowhere, and like I can see acres and acres and acres and acres, like endless acres of, you know, empty lands.
Yeah, and you know, you've just made me think, how the hell do they know what the population of Earth is?
Well, supposedly they have all these statistics from every department of health of every country that gives statistics to the World Health or Organization or the United Nations and all that. And I don't know, but then it's a very good question how they do that. They know
I
that.
mean, they try a census in this country and they threaten you with all kinds of things if you don't fill in the forms.
Yeah,
But I've never filled one in, not for years.
yeah,
And
but
there are people that move around under the radar.
yeah,
You know, if they can cast a vote for dead people,
well, I
then they
guess,
can.
yeah, I guess this is the our emotional upheaval in a sense that, we are have loads and loads of questions that doesn't really have the answer if we get the answer from the authorities.
I think that's very true in terms of, even though there are so many people who are awake and aware, many of them have secure jobs and a guaranteed salary, and they don't know what to do about it.
Right.
They have their nice little lives. They have enough money to pay their mortgage and buy their children what they need to buy for them. And if they can just go out on a Friday night with a new outfit and forget all about it, but they don't actually know what to do about it. How do you change it?
Exactly.
Because for me, the only thing that will change is, unless they actually blow themselves up first, which is quite possible. You know, I think they're imploding. It will take massive non-compliance. It'll take everybody to stop paying their bills.
Right.
To refuse to work. Well, I think many people are already doing that. They're refusing certain restrictions. But I think there are so many people, as long as they're okay, as long as they're comfortable, they don't see any need.
Right.
It doesn't seem to prick their conscience that other people on the other side of the world are starving. They're not looking too closely at all the child trafficking that's going on because it's uncomfortable.
Okay. Right. We have passed that minute again that I've mentioned. So
Okay.
perhaps just a last question now. So if this is a book, and if this is chapter 1,
Yeah.
and if we are talking about emotional upheaval, and as it is in most, vloggers and what have you, towards the end of conversations like this, the corny, the cliched, what would be your parting words, or what would be your advice to, to the reader, especially of that chapter? What kind of advice would you
I
give
think
to the people who's got having, also having all sorts of emotional upheaval?
I think many times in life, one emotional upheaval is the product of another. It's the result of early childhood trauma that has remained unresolved, that keeps leading us into the wrong situations. You could look at our current situation and say this is happening on a mass scale. It's like being inside of a toxic relationship, only it's the whole of humanity with the world's governments as the abuser. I would also say that there's a lot of emotional upheaval is caused through people's inability or unwillingness to accept change, to embrace change. If you don't like the way something looks, then change the way you look at it. But a lot of the things that upset and terrify people needn't, especially the things that haven't happened yet. Like your washing machine breaks down, so you pay so much a month to make sure you can afford to have it repaired, that kind of thing. Yeah. Or your children growing up and leaving home. You have to let them be their own people. You have to let them go. But some people will be devastated by that for years and never recover. The deeper the underlying problem is, they are emotionally dependent on their children.
That's deep.
Just as one example.
Yeah.
But these are the kind of things that floor people.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rosa. It's very,
Thank you,
very
Francis.
good conversation we had. I didn't really expect that, like it actually flows quite spontaneously and naturally, to be honest with you. I was nervous in the beginning, but it went well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not really nervous anymore. I don't know why, because I really don't like myself on camera at all. But I think that I'm not sure we stuck with emotional upheaval. I think we digressed quite a lot. So
Yes.
it'll be interesting to maybe listen back to it or see what it looks like.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording here now.